Welcome back to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. So the conversations around the new minimum wage bill gets our attention now. Two things. You recall that FEC had stepped up the memo on the new minimum wage bill in order to allow for further consultations by the president. And of course, more recently, southern governors are saying that states should be allowed to pay according to their ability. And now the president has come up with his National Reconstruction and Household Support Program. So let's get this conversation started now. And joining us to do that is senior economist, SPM Professionals, Mr. Paul Alaje, who joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Alaje, good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Always good to have you. So let's delve right into it now. The president's National Construction and Social Household Support Program is coming ahead of the new minimum wage bill, well, the final figure that the president may present. This is coming ahead of it. So many things to unpack from that. Perhaps we should look at two items or three out of this list of the president's program. There's a one-off allocation of 10 billion naira to states and the Federal Capital Territory for the procurement of buses. There's delivery of 50,000 naira uplift grant to 100,000 families per state for 3 months. Provision for labor unions and civil society organizations. What does this mean, particularly because it's coming ahead of the final figure to be presented by the president on the new minimum wage bill? And then these monies being spent, apparently they are apart from federal allocation amid, Nigeria's burgeoning debt. Give us your understanding of the economics around this, and particularly why it's coming ahead of the final figure of the government's proposal on the new minimum wage bill.
Well, thank you so much for having me once again. If you recall that the last time we met, I'd mentioned that the real minimum wage should be real indeed. It should not be nominal. When you look at what labor earned in terms of what money can buy, you would realize that policies over the time has weakened the earning ability of such money. So the real income in the real sense has emaciated, and for simpler language, it has significantly reduced. So, and I mentioned the last time I was here that it is not about what labor earns, it is what labor can do with what is earned. For instance, when labor earned 9,000 naira, labor could buy 2 bags of rice. When labor earned 18,000 naira, labor could buy 2 bags of rice with the old money. Remember that the concept of money started from, it was to replace the tradition of trade by barter. So it's important for us to measure what is it that we can buy with such money. Before I go to the president's policy, then labor was paid 30,000 naira. Suddenly, almost a 3/4 of bag of rice disappeared from what labor can buy. So it now became, labor could now buy with the minimum wage as of then, 1 bag and a little of a bag of rice. Then we've heard proposal of 62,000 naira, and of course I've made my opinion, research-based opinion or research information or contribution known at the national discourse, that what government should be looking at the minimum should be 100,000 naira. The reason is because when you look at what exchange rates closed yesterday, which I saw on your bar, even as we have this conversation, 1,500 plus. If you look at that, for you to have somebody to live in, to escape poverty trap, not for the person to be rich or for the person to be average, but to escape poverty trap, it needs to earn $2.15. That is more than 3,000 naira. Multiply 3,000 by 30. Already we are talking of 90,000. And remember, it's 15 cents. That is why you cannot, even for us not to be a nation that is paying people to be poor, we have to pay not less than 100,000. Do I think 100,000 is sufficient? Of course not. Because the practice over the years is that federal government and state with the private sector always compensate labor back to $100. $100 today, because of our floating and inconsistent exchange rate, we make that amount to be 150,000. In fact, labor is asking for 250,000. Do I think the economy can carry it? I don't think for such a long time. But I think that for 100,000, because you also need to ignite the demand side. You see a lot of conglomerates leaving Nigeria. One of the reasons many of them, at least 4 of them have cited, has been that the people's ability to buy has significantly reduced. And against the backdrop of all this conversation, we have recommended that government should look at what are the key things that labor will do with the money. And I think that is why government has rolled out some plan. I agree with a few points. There are some points I have quite a number of reservations about. We have seen that government said they will be giving some funds to the state government and the FCT. I remember that in 2023, President Tinubu also announced 31st of August that his administration, we give some donation and support to the public. Few months after that, government gave bags of rice. And I know in major festive season, some of these bags, even though some senators and honorables will say they were their contribution, that does not mean they are not. But I know federal government is actually donating. But the question is, after the festive season, are people still able to have access to the food? So here is it. To my mind, I think that what we should be looking at is to develop those key rather than just giving monies to the people or giving monies to state to give to the people. Here is what we should be looking at. How do we energize the economy? How do we support small-scale businesses, either through SMEDAN? How do we create what do we call it, a manufacturing hub or small-scale industrial hub? How do we support smallholders, small farmers that are smallholder farmers in different regions? How do we provide direct incentive to them? For our information, the price of fertilizers has since increased because of exchange rate. A lot of things are changing, so that this other good intention of government will not end up without any effect. How do you measure the impact of policy? There are what we call economic indicators, and these indicators are daily moving, even though they are reported quarterly by the National Bureau of Statistics. Some are reported annually. In fact, some are reporting as we are having this discussion. Now, the first one among them is GDP growth. If you see, one of the big 4 reported, I think yesterday, regarding the parameter or the thermometer or economic temperature of Nigeria, and it was revealed that the GDP of Nigeria has even reduced year on year. I think we are now doing 2.98. If you look at inflation at 33.95 or 94%, 33% is too high as against the target of government. When you look at unemployment, whatever parameter you want to use, it's also high beyond the target. And when you look at quality of life, or you want to talk about distribution of income, the goal there is fairness. So, but what is being paid today by state, by local government especially, which most of the time we don't talk because most local government have been capped by their states, it's far low, and I don't think it's sufficient for us to look at. So the president is looking at infrastructure. I hope and I want to believe that some of these policies we have financial backup almost immediately. But if you ask me, we need to task our state governments on food production by partnering with local farmers, or smallholder farmers, large-scale farmers within their state, and come up and make it one state, one produce, one local government, one produce. We have over 700. To develop Nigeria, to crash inflation, is not a difficult task. But if you are not purposeful, if you want to mix it with politics, unfortunately, we will only have administrative or political results. We will not have tangible economic result. And unfortunately, every quarter, Bureau of Statistics will release reports. If the report is not satisfactory, the truth is that private sector or private researcher will look at it, and global organizations are also watching what we are doing. So to me, yes, we've seen some of the support, And I support infrastructure that the president have added on his list. But what I'm particularly not very comfortable with is doling money to state over and over again without attaching purpose to it. We have said they will give funds to some persons from local government to wards. I don't know how many people have gone to register in their ward. We are not running for an election. We should understand that there is difference between politics and economy. The drivers of economics are small business owners. Not my figure. Central Bank released it in 2017 to say that over 90% of businesses in Nigeria are small businesses, micro, mini businesses. How do we support these businesses? Because if you have all of these businesses employ one person, only one person, you will see a dramatic turnaround in unemployment. And if you have all of these businesses even having some level of fresh air or growing beyond what they are doing, of some financial support, then you're going to see significant improvement.
Yeah, Mr. Alaje, I want to follow up on that particular thought of yours. So all of these things you've mentioned, quite brilliant ideas. So why do they always go for these ad hoc, short-term, stopgap measures that literally don't move the needle?
Well, my favorite book says, if the foundation be destroyed, what shall the righteous do? It said, wisdom is the principal thing. It's important for us to act with deep knowledge and to act and understand the foundation of economy. Every economy that wants to grow from our first republic, even before independence, we had a document that guided us up until military intervention. Even when there was military intervention, does not even stop bringing in another development plan that had legislation. The challenge we have had in recent time is that even though we have been developing plans, some rolling plans, some development plan, like we had a development plan, I think few months, yes, or a year or so to the end of President Buhari's administration. It was not backed up by law. And in developing such document, so that it will not be ad hoc, we all know where we are going. If I ask people, where do you think Nigeria will be by 2040? Where do you think Nigeria economy will be by 2050? These are honest questions we must provide answers to. The truth is that some of us that are here have refused to leave, not because we have no option to travel, like many persons have said, oh, we don't think Nigeria can be good. I strongly believe Nigeria will be a great country. I strongly believe Nigeria will change. I strongly believe Nigeria will develop. And it is to that effect we must now not just say it as mere words, but work at it. And in working at it, it's important for the president. 1 year is gone already. We need to have a national development strategy paper or document such that federal government will champion it. All the state government we plug into it. President Buhari came up with economic recovery and growth plan. Unfortunately, only 6 out of 36 states supported that document, implemented the document. 30 states were wondering what was happening. So when the result of economic recovery and growth plan came, and it was not a success, we were not surprised. 2, that document did not have financial backing. So the budgetary allocation did not take its life from the economic recovery and growth plan. We're saying that this plan must have an handshake with our national budget. 3, there was no legislation. So these are reasons why in recent time, most development plans we have had have failed. We have seen another one called National Economic Development Plan. And this plan looks a bit overambitious, relying on private sector that was never organized, even though a few persons were called. My advice is, so that we don't be looking for putting oxygen in human beings. We can't be carrying oxygen on the street. So we cannot live our lives or our economy permanently by having support system. No, we need to call up critical stakeholders over the matter of our economy, starting with those who are the real drivers of this economy, private sector, executive at local, state level, and representative of local government. What do we really want for this nation? If this economy must move forward, we must agree. And I mean across political parties, APC, PDP, Labour Party, all the key political parties, even at inter-party level. How do we move from the current economic quagmire? What must we invest on? Which area must come first? Do we need to fix our energy challenges first? What do we want our universities, polytechnic colleges of education to look like? How much should we truly be paid? How much should we borrow in money so that we can have this major progress? Honestly, these are questions in economics that we must ask ourselves and provide answers to. If not, because a state will be doing a different thing, another state may think that it's not right for them right now today.
And it's only right, really, because we can't continue to do the same things and expect a different result. So we need to think deeper, creatively, and change our strategy. But if for a moment we can just take a look at some of the things in that National Construction and Household Support Program. By the way, as you said, this is something that had been promised since last year. A lot of people thought it was going to come fast, particularly with subsidy removal. But first on that list is road construction. Projects like Sokoto-Badagry Highway, the Trans-Saharan Highway. It was said much later in that statement that this is meant to aid, food transportation, generally to move goods back and forth. There's also the one-off allocation of 10 billion naira to states and the FCT for the procurement of buses. So this is meant to ease transportation. Well, at the heart of, a lot of people's spending, aside food, is transportation, particularly now that the cost of petrol has, since tripled since last year. So that's also there. Then delivery of 50,000 naira, what has been called uplift grants to 100,000 families per state for 3 months. So we're at this point where money will be given out yet again. And of course, there's set to be provisions for labor unions, civil society. And take a look at this, Mr. Alaje. Deployment of 155 billion naira for the purchase and sale of assorted foodstuff to be distributed across the nation. It's not quite clear what that means. Will they be imported? Would it be sourced locally? How will they be, distributed and all of that? But still a lot of questions around this. But for you, do you think it ties into what a lot of people have said? The solution to this economic situation is not just in increasing the minimum wage. It's also in fixing, the constituent issues like transportation, infrastructure, and the rest. Because even if you give people 200,000 naira and the infrastructure is not good, electricity is not what it ought to be, it still won't change anything. Does this tie for you?
Well, for me, like I said, it's flat for me. The infrastructure conversation there is a welcome one. And I remember that before the president was sworn to office, I was quite vehement as to why we must invest around our food production zone. What seems not to be very clear about the document is the issue of manufacturing, production, and farm output. I think rather than giving monies to individuals, we should target production, we should target manufacturing, we should target output. I think that should be the focus of government from now henceforth. Secondly, we have seen the issue of CNG. I've heard it even from Labour and some of my friends at different headquarters talking about CNG. I remember that I was in part of Europe to advocate for people to come and invest in Nigeria and why Nigeria should also be considered as a country of option where people should put their funds to some persons who are having such interest in Africa. Now, here is the point. I went to where CNG is produced, and what they mentioned is that all around Europe, CNG production will end by 2030. We're talking of 6 years from now because of emission and environmental reasons. So if you Google that, I think it's available online too. And some of these CNGs that they said, of course, they have, I engaged directly with some of the producers and people that were going to be sending some of those vehicles to Africa, and especially Nigeria. And they said they need quite a number, but it's not even sufficient. So, but I asked them, what happens in the next 6 years when you stop production? They said, well, we have been looking for where to even move some of these things to, because some of them are not even new, some of them are used, and some of the manufacturing firms are not even producing, even though they are not even waiting till 2030 to stop production. Here is why I'm saying all of this. Can we look for alternative? Because yes, it can solve some of our problems momentarily or temporarily, but what is the permanent solution? Can we support car assemblers in Nigeria to look for alternative solution in terms of alternative energy source? Because whether you use CNG or you use petrol or you use AGO diesel, you are still talking about black oil. Emission is still there. So can we look for alternative? Because if CNG, from the information that just shared, which is in Europe, which is also in the public domain, it's online. You can search for yourself. Will not be there permanently. So if we litter our street with this, it will solve our problem momentarily. But what happens to it? Again, remember that such money will not stay in our country. The jobs we want to create will not stay in our country. Yeah, we're going to have some kinds of job, but the manufacturing, the industrial job will not stay with us. So can we support our own local producers such that if you support, and we have heard that you can even change some of these tanks from petrol tank or diesel tank to CNG tanks or to gas-based tank. But we have manufacturers in Nigeria. Can state governors that are receiving this fund talk to them so that we can retain more jobs locally and we can grow this economy in real sense? Listen, our legislature bought some vehicles. The monies are gone. What was exchange rate when we were making such procurement? It was not as high as this. Look at the exchange rate today. The more you import a product or products from outside your country, you are making three decisions. Number one, you are consuming for your satisfaction. Number two, you are telling your country you don't want the country to have jobs. Number three, you are telling the central bank to be under pressure because of foreign reserve. Now, for us to help central bank, we have to start looking inward. By all means, anything we can do locally. Our currency must be a currency to reckon with. And you cannot reckon with currency alone. You will reckon with it by looking at products that currency is bringing. And that is why, for me, I think beyond looking for CNG because of argument for CNG, can we look within Nigeria to have such production? That said, we look at the issue of supporting individuals, 50,000, 100,000. I know before now government has been making such provision. In fact, last administration was quite huge by giving people 5,000, 10,000, and different ones. We saw trader money, we saw market money. But what is the impact? Poverty grew, not my figure. The Bureau of Statistics showed that poverty level increased. UNDP showed that poverty level increased, average of 5 million to 7 million on annual basis. People living below poverty line. In fact, they later issued a number for people living in multidimensional poverty. Not my figures. According to MBS of Nigeria, 133 million people. And if you ask MBS, smart minds, brilliant minds are there. Even though some of the time they don't speak. But when you ask them to speak to their numbers, they will tell you that the way out of this is first agro-processing and manufacturing and production. And I think that is any kind of support we are looking at should be targeted towards this. So I completely align with infrastructure, especially at the issue of railway. Government have said we're going to be giving counterpart funding for Port Harcourt to Maiduguri. That's a brilliant idea. I've been waiting for this so that we can have that line quickly completed. We also need to complete the whole of rail map of Nigeria. It's important so that we can have alternative. I don't think this time and age, heavy duty should still be moving on the road, What I mean by that is, essentially for food movement from one region to another, food coming from Sokoto wants to find their way to Lagos. Can we do this consistently by rail, either by narrow gauge or standard gauge? Whatever method, let's find this alternative and let's boost this output. And I can tell you, this is a permanent solution. It is not going to be momentary or temporal solution. Because if we do this, it's a matter of time. We have been having this engagement for some time now, even before now. In the last 10 years, our argument and presentation has really not changed. Has been about economy, has been about the concerns with it. Why? Because our strategies have remained the same.
All right, Mr. Alaje, I'd like you to speak to two things now. I noted that you said earlier that beyond just doling out funds to states, that there should be purpose tied to it. And that takes us back to 2023, where 5 billion naira grant was announced as monies to states to help cushion the effect of the removal of fuel subsidy. The last we heard was that 2 billion naira had been released. We do not know if the balance of 3 billion naira had also been released to the states. Now we're hearing 10 billion naira to be released to states for the purchase of buses. Should there also be a need to tie some form of accountability to states? Because you said that, according to checks, Nigeria has dropped on gross domestic product. So between last year and this year, we've had time enough to assess the impact of the release of those funds on the economies of the subnational. That's on the one hand. Perhaps you should respond to that first before I take up the second.
Well, I must tell you that the nation is not complete. It will not be a complete nation without having a subnational, the states, in this regard. Funds has been given to states. Some states, they already have proper accounting system, and I think that some of this information should be made available to the public to see what they've done, maybe in the review of their last year budget, because some of this money should be captured in their budget or in the review of the budget. But for most of the states, I doubt, because we search for information on a weekly basis that is available both from national and subnational. But I doubt we have such document with us. Whether the 3 billion naira has been released or not, it's also not very clear. We know that there have been some support going on from federal government to state government. And I think federal government will also need to speak. If not, the whole of Nigeria will think everything is about the federal government. So federal government will also need to speak so that they can guide transparency. Now, because some of these funds are not targeting manufacturing or targeting production or improve productivity, that is why they are seeing, or they are becoming more or less excess money supply in the system, excess liquidity. So the central bank would say that there is excess liquidity. Why would they say that? Because it will fuel inflation. So if it's fueling inflation, central bank will come, or MPC will come with a policy to increase MPR. I just want you to look at how economy is connected. When they increase MPR by raising it high, private sector that could have even helped in the situation, we now have to borrow at higher rates. So because the rates are high, some of them will be concerned. You have seen exodus of some multinational from Nigeria. What will that mean? Unemployment will increase. What will that mean? Poverty and hunger will increase. So the good intention of government, of Mr. President, for instance, I want to support state by giving them money. But because it's not tied to a productive activity that is measurable, it is not smart, specific, measurable, what do we call it now? Something that you can measure, something that is realistic and is time-bound. It is not there. So if you cannot give it time, duration, the duration with which you must do this, and it's not realistic, and you cannot measure it, and it's not specific, honestly, it will be spent at the will of the governors. And some governors may think what is important to them is that they want their people to go to Jerusalem or to go to Holy Land or Mecca. That could be their priority.
All right,
so
very quickly,
in giving this kind of support, whether it is loan or it is financial support, it must be tied to a specific instruction or what we want them to achieve.
All right, very quickly, the second point, another component on the president's list for this reconstruction and household support program is provision for labor and civil society, whatever that means. But are you worried that this could disarm labor? And now that it's coming ahead of that final figure on the minimum wage bill, will labor still reserve the moral standing to oppose any figure that is not, favorable to a cross-section of workers in Nigeria, particularly that it's coming now?
Well, I want to strongly believe that labor will understand that even if they are giving ₦1 million each today, you need to prorate that to just 5 months. 5 years. That's divided by 60. You see what that will be, in 60 months compared to what they earn regularly. So if you increase minimum wage and you had the same amount, you know that it's progressive. It is not just one stop. So whatever that is, and I don't also understand the civil society part. So I think when the implementation starts, we would see it. But I want to strongly believe that the wake-up call on labor, I've continued to champion the fact that labor should also try and soft-pedal and consider within the range that is realistic, 100 to 150,000 rather than 250,000. And I continue to issue the appeal to labor for the sake of this economy that seems to be fragile right now. And if you look at, I think, PwC's report, which also alluded to that, our fiscal concern, I think for their expectation or projection for 2024, when you check the report, I think it was issued yesterday, you see that one of the things, I think the first thing in terms of the expectation for the year is fiscal concern. So we need to look at the realities that are possible, things that are possible from now to the end of the year, even for next year, as we are already projecting what may likely happen in Nigeria next year. We're still working on that and see if that will be in public domain, maybe towards the end of the year. But the truth is that I think Labour should also consider that. But if government wants to give them, apart from increased minimum wage, which we strongly think that it should not be less than 100,000 for Labour, because of the economic realities of today, I think it would be a welcome development.
All right, Mr. Alaje. Just within the confines of the macroeconomic conversation, are you seeing enough effort by the government to see how they can stimulate the economy enough? Because there are concerns about stopgap, which I've consistently mentioned. Are you seeing enough in terms of stimulation that can taper inflation? Inflation is like blood pressure in an economy. If it doesn't come down, every other, whatever it is you're doing, has little or no meaning. And now we're looking at 33, which is likely going to be high, but although the rate is quite slower month on month, and food inflation is also increasing. Because some people have looked at the management, both on the monetary and the fiscal side, they've held some things look like an experiment, and there are projections as to it coming down. Some people are saying 29%, the government is earmarking 21% at the end of the year, which is a very long shot given where we are at the middle of the year. So is there enough stimulus besides all of this stopgap that you're seeing that can help us get back to some manageable point? Because right now, our equilibrium point has shifted. So stability now in FX has now moved from 700 and maybe talking about 1,000, 1,002. That means the quality of life is going to drastically change and things will be difficult, as it is already.
Absolutely. Well, giving people money, 100,000, 50,000, will definitely drive inflation up. And no matter what we do, even if you add 1 naira to minimum wage, or 2 naira or 5 naira, with the kind of number we are looking at, it will drive inflation up. So do I think that we are making effort to bring down inflation right now? The answer will be no. What must we do to bring down inflation? And how must we do it to bring down inflation? Is by looking at what is driving inflation. What is driving inflation is food inflation. And food inflation is over 40%. What are we doing to boost food supply? What deliberate action are we taking at state level and local level? Well, I think they are really very minimal. We need to do something with that. Can we have targets? If government is saying we are giving you 10 billion naira, Plateau State, you are receiving 10 billion naira. How would you help us improve the output of, what do we call it now? Irish potato. Say you are producing, numbers from Ministry of Agri shows that you are doing 10,000 tons. Can you increase that to 30,000 tons so that the price will crash? So that scarcity will not be a factor anymore. How will Kogi State help us with improved supply of cashew nuts? How will, say, Ekiti State help us with improved supply of cocoa? So we need to look at supply side. The truth is that if I should summarize our challenges right now, our challenges are on supply. Unfortunately, the strategy we are using to fight these challenges are on demand. And that's why we have policy mismatch. So central bank, for instance, is saying control MPR, control CRR, control liquidity ratio. All of those are demand. But the real problem released by the Bureau of Statistics is supply. So how would you want to solve a problem by looking at, you want to solve a problem, a person has not bathed, is very dirty and smelling, but you are looking at the person in the mirror, and in your mind you are cleaning the mirror, thinking that you are cleaning the person. That is why from the former central bank governor to the one that worked, I think, temporarily, and what we have now, the policy strategy has been the same. So in solving the problem, we need to look at output, we need to look at production, we need to look at improved productivity for us to solve this problem this moment today.
an inexhaustible conversation, I must say, and we hope that, the final figure of the minimum wage bill will be favorable to all, such that we can, close the door on this conversation, at least for now. Mr. Paul Alaji, Senior Economist, SPM Professionals, thank you so much for your time and contribution on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, up next on the morning brief, we'll turn our attention to an equally important matter that deals with social reconstruction this time around the menace of drug abuse and drug use. Stay with us for this profitable conversation. We'll be right back.